Hello everybody. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to use Bootstrap 4 to build a responsive mobile first website. And so to do that I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. Bootstrap, it says here, is a responsive mobile first project framework that really basically gives you the files that you need to build like it says, a responsive website. So pretty simple. All you have to do when you get to the website is press download, and from there it's going to give you some options as to exactly what you want to download, and we want the compiled CSS and JS files, JavaScript files. So let's go ahead and press download. As soon as that downloads, it's going to give you a folder with CSS files in it and JavaScript files in it. Okay, so what I'm going to do before I go any further though is I'm going to rename this to something pretty simple and easy to understand. So I'm just going to call it wakeboarding. Okay, and now I'm going to move that to my desktop just so I can easily find it, so it's not in my downloads folder anymore. So I'm going to go to my desktop into my wakeboarding folder, and this is going to be the beginning of a hobby site all about wakeboarding. And so to get started beyond this, I'm going to have to go back to the Get Bootstrap site, and I'm going to go ahead and click on the introduction part, and then I'm going to go to the starter template. Okay, and this is some code that they've provided that we can just copy and paste into a brand new HTML document. And you're going to want to use any kind of plain text editor for this. And I'm using Sublime Text too. You can see as soon as I paste it in, it realizes that this is code. And just to kind of go through a little bit here, when you first open the file, it's going to have a doc type, and that's going to provide you with the type of HTML, and this is HTML5, it's the newest version of HTML. Then it's going to provide you with an HTML tag and the language, and then the head of the site is going to provide some metadata for the browser to read. So this is UTF-8 is the type of text that it's going to be reading, and then this part of the code tells the browser that this is going to be a responsive website, a mobile friendly website actually. And then the next bit of code is our Bootstrap CSS file. And notice that the href is not linking to a local file, but it's a file that is hosted on Get Bootstrap's servers. So you don't have to worry about updating your files. If they want to do updates to the 4.0 Bootstrap 4.0 file, they can do that, and it will automatically feed into your website. And then you've got your title, okay, and that's going to appear in the tab. So I'm just going to rename this. Instead of saying hello world, I'm going to call it wakeboarding home, because this is my home page. And then you've got your body, okay, and in the body I've got just a simple h1, and then down here I've got some script code, and this is what allows a lot of the additional functionality like slideshows and drop downs and all that kind of stuff to work. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and save it. Let's do a file save, and I'm going to go to my desktop and into my wakeboarding folder, and I'm going to rename this index.html. Okay, so now when I look at my folder, I should have the index file along with the CSS and the JavaScript folders. Okay, so don't put the index file in any of them, just make sure it's among them. Now when I double click it, it should show me hello world. Okay, and that's exactly what we see here in the Sublime text, is the H1 that says hello world. Notice in the tab it says wakeboarding home, and so I know that this is working because it's in Helvetica font, and it's in it appears to be working just fine. So that's the very basic template that Bootstrap gives you, and then I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Bootstrap website and go get a navigation, okay, because that's usually how most of these Bootstrap files work, is, or both Bootstrap sites work, is usually the navigation is one of the first things that you see on the site. So over here in under documentation, we just went over introduction. But if you scroll down on the left, you'll see some options for layouts, which we'll get to, and content, and components. We're going to use those a lot. Okay, so that's where you're going to find your navigation. So click on components, And from there, you can add all kinds of different additional features that they call components that we see a lot in a lot of modern websites today. So, these would be like alerts, buttons are very common, drop downs, which we'll get to within our navigation. But what I want you to go down to is the nav bar. Okay, nav bar is going to provide you with all kinds of different navigation options. This first one has a drop down and it's got a search menu. More, if you kind of keep going down here, they're going to show you how to add, if you wanted to, a little, add a little image into it, and add just a regular simple navigation without a drop down. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and grab this main one here. It's the nav bar with the drop down, and I'm going to go ahead and press copy. And then I'm going to go into my Bootstrap file and I'm going to paste it. Instead of my H1, that was just kind of a placeholder. That was basically just to make sure that it's working. I'm going to go ahead and give myself lots of room in the body tag so that I can add this navigation code. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste it. Okay, it's a lot of code. I just did a lot there. But again, all I did was I just went to the Bootstrap site and copied the code and then just pasted it right after the body opened. Okay, so now I've got basically all the code that will make the navigation work. If I just do a file save, I can go back to my site and refresh it, and you'll see that you should have a responsive navigation, so that when I make even the browser smaller, you'll see that it closes into this collapsed hamburger menu. And then you can make it larger, and you can see that it's very mobile friendly and responsive. So next I'm going to go back into the Sublime text here and just show you kind of what we just pasted. Okay, so we're dealing with a nav tag, and the nav tag opens here on line 15 and then closes on line 49. And this is an HTML5 tag that tells the browser that we're going to create a navigation. And the navigation has different classes on it. It's got a nav bar class, showing that it is a navigation bar. Nav bar expand large. This is telling it when it's going to make the jump to mobile size, and in this case it's going to jump at large size. And then I've got a nav bar light, and that's talking about the text color of the navigation, and then the background light is about the background color. Okay, so these are classes that are identifying more information about the nav tag. Now back to this one, the nav bar expand large. There are generally 5 different sizes of Bootstrap sites that Bootstrap has identified. There's extra large, there's large, and then there's medium, and then there's small, and then there's extra small. There's 5 different sizes. So if I go to like the example page here on the Bootstrap site, and I'll give you an example of the carousel page. Okay, at certain times throughout the width of this browser, you're going to see it make these kind of little jumps. Okay, so the first jump is going to be about here. You can see actually these items down here will make a little small jump. So it's extra large, large. Okay, whenever it makes that jump, it's large. Now medium. And then we got small. You can see the navigation changed. And then extra small is as small as the browser will go. So there's 5 main sizes. Small, extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. Okay, so 5 different sizes. So basically, again, what this is telling the browser is at what point do you want that navigation to make it into the hamburger menu. And so if I change this to MD instead of LG, it'll make the jump a little bit sooner, or actually a little bit later at medium size. Okay, so it won't be until it gets to about here that it makes the jump, which I think is a little bit better than letting it jump at the large size. So you can leave that at LG, or you can change it to MD. Then the next one is Nav Bar Light, okay, and that's a class that's telling it what color do you want the nav bar to be, and you can see that it's pretty white, quite light there. So if I do Nav Bar Dark, it's going to change. Okay, so now it's assuming that you have a dark background, and that's why the text is suddenly light. Obviously, you wouldn't want to change that without changing the background color also to dark. So now I can make a dark navigation. So it's got a dark background, and because the nav bar dark is selected, it is making the text white. Okay, so you can either change this to nav bar dark or and background dark, or leave it to Nav Bar Light and BG Light. You can also go back into the Get Bootstrap website, and let's go back to the documentation, and we will go down to the components and go back to our nav bar where we found this code, and we can scroll down even farther with all these examples of navigations. We can go all the way down to where it's giving us some color schemes. And so you can see we did the nav bar dark, BG dark, nav bar light, BG light. You could do nav bar dark, BG primary, which would give you a blue background. You could also add in your own style code to create your own background if you want to. Of course, you would have to delete the class that's talking about the background. And so there are lots of different color schemes that Bootstrap provides. And instead of saying BG blue, which would make sense, Bootstrap has actually created several different themes, and you can find those here. If I just click on buttons, you can see all those different themes. So button primary is blue, button secondary is gray. You've got success, which is green, danger, red, warning, yellow, info, blue. So you can see that you can add these different classes to, say, for example, in our navigation, we wanted to change it to success or green. I could go back into my Bootstrap here, and I can say nav bar dark BG success. Okay, and that's going to make my navigation green. Okay, you can see that it's green. Like I said earlier, you could also add a specific color. BG success, you could do BG warning, and that would be yellow. Of course, you would probably want to make the nav bar light at that point because it's a lighter background, and so you might want a darker text. Okay, so it might be a little bit confusing because the nav bar light is assuming that it's asking what color is the background, is it light or dark, and then so that's what the text will be responding to. So in this case, the nav bar light is referring to, it's saying, hey, it's going to be a lighter background, so you might as well do dark text. So it's kind of confusing here that nav bar light means black text and nav bar dark means white text, but either way, I think you'll get the hang of it a little bit. BG warning, you could do BG danger, that would be red. But you could also delete that one altogether, and you can add your own style code. Style equals quote background color, and then you could type in any string of CSS code and see what it is. 3CADE2. I'm not sure what color that is, but if I refresh, okay, it's this kind of blue color, which looks kind of nice. So I might just leave that there. So anyway, those are just some options for you in your navigation if you wanted to change the color. Later on, we've got an A, obviously is a link, okay, and it's linking to the word to #, which really is null. It's meaning it's linking to nothing right now, but it's linking the word navbar, and we can see that in action here. When I click the word navbar, nothing happens. It's linking to #. So I would recommend changing the word navbar to something relevant to your site. So I'm just going to call this wakeboarding. This would also be where if you wanted to add a little image or an icon or a PNG file or something, you might want to put that here instead of text. And then you would tell it exactly where you want it to link to. And normally when people click on a logo, they're going to link back to the index.html file, right? Go ahead and save that, refresh it. So now when I click on the word wakeboarding, you can see it's linking to itself, which is exactly what we want it to do for now. Then we can go a little bit farther into the code here, and we've got a button. And though we don't see a button now, that button is actually referring to the drop down here, the hamburger menu. Okay, so we don't see it yet. We can see here that it's collapsed right now, and it's not going to work until it reaches the mobile screen. And so don't really worry about that too much, but that's what that code is. Then we have this really large div that is basically encompassing the rest of our navigation. Okay, so the div class, it's the collapsed menu that will come out when we press the hamburger bar, or it will come out when the screen is at a desktop size. So everything here is listed in a UL, an unordered list. All of the pages are listed out. And you can see that the UL opens here and it closes all the way down here. Okay, so everything from the UL opening to closing is all of the list items listing out our pages. And the first list item is the nav item active. And active means it's the page that's going to be the lightest, and it's going to show you that this is the page that we're on. And actually that is true, because when we look at this first list item, we are on the home page. And this word active is what's causing the home page right now to be whiter than the other ones. Okay, so in a minute, when we divide up our page a little bit into the different sections, we can move this around depending on the page that we're on. So we're just going to leave that there for now. But you can see here when we open the list and close it, we've got a link tag here, and it's linking to the word home. And I'm going to go ahead and add, instead of the pound sign, I'm going to want to link to my index page, right? Because this is my index page and it's my home page. So when the user clicks the word home, I want them to go to the index page. And obviously nothing's really going to change too much. Whether they click wakeboarding or home, it's probably always going to go to that home page. Next list item, we have just a very basic nav item here. It opens with the list class nav item and closes the list item. And in it we have a basic link. And instead of the word link, you might want to write like something like about. And instead of the pound sign, we're going to want to create a file that will be the about page. And though we haven't created it yet, we want to predict the future a little bit and tell it what we will name the file. And so I'm just going to type in about.html. Okay, and when I duplicate my pages and multiply them, you'll see it won't be hard to make that page. The next list item is a little bit more difficult because there's a lot going on here. It's opening the list and closing it, but inside of there you have a drop down happening with its own little kind of hierarchy. And that's what we see here in the navigation. When you click the word drop down, this isn't just another list item, there's a whole world happening here in the drop down. Okay, so you can see here that it's saying list class nav item, just like this one has a nav item, just like this one has a nav item, but the difference here is that this one is nav item drop down. Okay, and so this class is telling the browser that this is actually going to be a drop down. And we are linking to the word drop down so that when the user clicks the word drop down, the actual drop down occurs, the action takes place. And in this case, the href being pound sign, that is actually going to be just left exactly how it is, because we don't want the user to click on the word drop down and go to another page or another file. We want this pound sign to be here so that the link can be more of an action to make the drop down be revealed rather than actually going to a page. Now, I don't recommend making the word drop down be your drop down. I don't often go to websites and see the word drop down in the navigation. And so I'm going to go ahead and rename this resources. Okay? That way when the user clicks on the word resources, it'll fold out the rest of the navigation and it will provide them some pages of resources. Okay? So the first list item that's not really a list item, but it's a link inside this dropdown is action. I probably don't want the word action to be here either. I'll go ahead and rename this to be like links. If I had a list of different links about wakeboarding, and I would rename this to be the appropriate file that I want to link to. So I'll call that links.html. I've got another page and I will call it, let's say, videos, if I had a bunch of videos on wakeboarding. And then the last one here, I might do something like tutorials. If somebody wanted to get some wakeboarding tutorials, and I would call this tutorials.html. Okay, And so now when I save it and refresh, you'll see that the about changed. Obviously when I click there, it doesn't go anywhere because I haven't made the page yet. When I click resources, now I have links, videos, and tutorials. And you can see down here in the taskbar down at the bottom, you'll see that the file names will be correct when and if I when I make them. Now, you'll see this drop-down divider, and that is appearing between my videos and tutorials, and you'll see that in action here, this kind of divider that's dividing the items. You can leave that in. I recommend either adding it in between the other two so that it maybe looks a little bit nicer and more consistent so that they all have dividers, or just taking them out altogether. You don't need these dividers, but you can delete them and refresh, and you'll see that it's just a basic drop down. So it's up to you whether you want to keep them or not. I'll just leave them in there for now and kind of move on down here. The last list item is called disabled. It usually occurs if you have a navigation that, like if you haven't logged in yet, or if there's something that a user doesn't have access to or shouldn't have access to, maybe one of the items would be grayed out. I don't think that there's any reason for you to disable somebody from your website right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that class, the disabled class. Just like this active makes this one brighter, the disabled makes this one more faint, and we don't really want that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that class from this item, and then in saying disabled, I will call this one contact us, or just say contact. Always has to be a contact page somewhere in a site. Okay, and then now when I refresh my page, you'll see that my navigation here is working just fine. Now I get to the form, and by the way, I do want to mention that if you want to add more items, it's just as easy as copying that last item and just pasting it, making sure that you're still within the UL. You can just copy that list item from the opening to the closing, and you would just change the file name here, the file name here, and then you would change the word here. Okay, not hard to add new items. I also want to say that if you want to delete the drop down altogether, if you don't think that you want to drop down or need one, you can open it here in the list item, and then down here where the list item closes, you could just delete that whole entire list item altogether. And you don't necessarily need a drop down for your site. Okay, and so it could work just exactly the same way without it. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave that in there, and then I'm going to delete this last one that I added. Now down here in the form section, this is making your search work. Okay, and that's making a little search pop up. I'm actually not going to use a search for this site. You could if you want to, if you had the back-end code to make it work. Just with a front-end framework like Bootstrap, it doesn't work natively, and so you'd have to build some code to make it actually work. So since we're not doing that, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that altogether. Save it and refresh it, and there you have a working navigation with the beginning site. In the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to tweak this navigation just a little bit more by adding some social media icons, and we're going to go into Font Awesome and add that in. And then we're going to talk about how to add some different layouts to your site.